guys, welcome back to Of Stone and Clay. This is episode 134. Today's guest, I don't even know how to introduce him. He's a man of mystery. We have Christapher Cogswell today. He's a little bit of an expert, and I'm sure it started as a hobbyist and a passion project, but I know you have a background in anthropology, and you've done a lot of work in the history of fertility and epigenetics and health and historical nutrition and just all these things, and you're here today to kind of give us some insight. And I was telling you before, these days when it comes to health, mental health, spiritual health, healing, nutrition, like there's a million opinions out there and everyone's an expert, and so who knows what's true. Yeah. And so I would love to pick your brain a little bit and find some of these connections between physical health and mental health and physical healing and spiritual healing and what we can do to be healthier, Right. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your background. I was a history major, so I love anthropology. It's kind of a step cousin.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I took a couple anthropology courses in college. So tell me what got you interested in, I guess, human history and the human condition.
Yeah. I was drawn to cultural studies, really to understand myself and the human condition better, the impact of culture on all of us. And it was only after leaving anthropology and after my master's degree that I discovered arguably the most important research ever conducted in nutrition, which was done about almost 100 years ago. And it is so profound that it completely changed my life. And it changed the course of my life as well. I decided not to continue with my academic studies because I realized that there was a screaming need for education about this particular research. Mm-hmm. So I started a company in the late 90s, which was probably the first perinatal health company that had been created. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There may have been others, but certainly in the e-commerce area, we created a company that brought together the best products and resources that help people transform their health.
And what exactly does perinatal mean?
Yeah, it's around birth, basically. Mm-hmm. So it's all about helping to support the health of the child by what happens right before birth and after birth. Mm-hmm. And it was quite an experience because it really led me to an understanding of the power of business and entrepreneurism to transform lives. And I could have been doing, dissertation research, PhD research in other countries on exotic cultures, but I just couldn't bear it at that point to do research that would be cataloged away and might help understand some particular culture. But this research was so incredible and so transformative for me personally that I could see that it was going to be a big deal. Mm. And it really has become that in the last 25 years.
Yeah. It's funny. As a history major, I was kind of obsessed with academia for a minute and was obsessed with research and just like, I want to put out like articles or books that are about really specific niche parts of history that no one's covered or whatever. And as I got more into it, I was just a little bit disenchanted because it felt like I could potentially do all this work and like 7 people with PhDs would read it. Right. And then it would rot away in a library,
exactly.
Yeah. And so I still loved research and learning and people, but I just wanted to be more creative and I wanted more people to read whatever I was working on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to make a difference was really what I realized was there was just a screaming need. And, as a young person, I was really searching for a way to make a difference. And so that led me to I had been a live food vegan in the 90s.
What does live food mean?
So it's basically eating all your foods vegetarian, vegan, and without being cooked.
Okay.
So it's sort of a niche diet that was pretty popular on the West Coast for quite a while. And
so you're just eating raw vegetables and stuff?
Yeah, sprouted nuts and seeds, fruits, things like that.
Okay.
And I felt good for the first couple of years, and then after it was almost 6 years, and the last couple of years I started really wasting away. Hair started falling out at age 26 or 27. And
how would you have done in a fight?
Oh, not good. I mean, I'm not a heavy person now, but I was probably 40 pounds less than I am now.
Yeah.
So it wasn't good. And I was probably in denial. And so at some point I had to acknowledge things were not going well. And I was really praying for, a solution, a breakthrough. And through very strange, serendipitous circumstances, I was led to this research. And that's a whole story in itself. But it was so shocking to me and so revelatory that it created a different. It made me look at everything in my life to that point differently and my future. So one thing in particular was I had in graduate school in San Francisco, I had volunteered to teach about this. I'd written a small book. I was giving some classes because the first couple of years I felt great. And I actually gave a course, volunteer basis, to a group in San Francisco of people with AIDS on the immune system. And, it went fine. And I kind of, I moved on. I did my master's thesis and then moved out of the area. But when I discovered this material, I realized that I should never have done that. In teaching people with immune deficiencies about health, I was not qualified. I wasn't the person who should have been doing this. And it made me really, really question my assumptions of what I knew, but also what I didn't know. So
now real quick, were you at that time when you became a live vegan?
Live food vegan. Yeah.
Were you just always sort of obsessed with health and maximizing your body, or was it a little bit of morality too?
Yeah, it was. I became a vegetarian when I was 21, basically trying to see if I could adjust some of my blood measures. And at that time the thought was that saturated fat was the key determinant in cholesterol and the cholesterol and heart disease. And that's all been reevaluated in the last 25 years. But, and then there was also a feeling about wanting to be having a lighter impact on the world and on animals and things like that.
Okay. Okay.
It was a series of things, but, when I moved out to California for graduate school, it was like being a kid in a candy store, having grown up in northern Wisconsin, where there wasn't a lot of fresh food. And now you're in the Bay Area and the Mediterranean climate, kind of the capital of local foods and farmers markets, and at least one of those at that time. So it was a time of exploration spiritually, getting into meditation and all kinds of new thoughts and ideas. And at that time, the Bay Area was really a mecca for new thinking and
some
and thoughts.
progressive thinking.
Yeah. So it was quite an amazing time, and I got lulled in thinking this was the path for me dietarily by what it felt so incredible in the first 2 years, and then after that, it was a slow decline that it was harder to notice.
Yeah,
and so again, finding this research was just such an epiphany, and it just changed everything. And it's one of those moments in your life that I felt like everything was guiding me in this direction. And so it was really profound. And it's been 25 years of working in this field and with parents and with others, and watching health fertility, health, wellness, health conditions be completely transformed over and over again, and being able to support families with their health even before they begin having children has been one of the greatest joys of my life.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Okay, well, tell me about this freaking research.
Yeah. So some people will probably have heard of Dr. Weston Price, but others not. Even after, so he published his research in 1942, and it was called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. But it has been largely forgotten for various reasons that we can go into. But basically what happened was he was a very eminent dentist in the 1920s in Cleveland. That's where we'll start the story. And he basically started noticing his young patients having problems that their parents didn't have. So, primarily dental problems. So when you're a dentist and you have been in practice for a while, and especially at that time, you're used to seeing people with very straight teeth, plenty of room for the wisdom teeth. And he started seeing that his young patients were having overbites, underbites, cavities, not enough room for the wisdom teeth. And he also noticed that it appeared that their heads were getting narrower. And he was also kind of an anthropologist. At that time, there were kind of these Renaissance scientists who did a lot of everything. And, he wasn't just a dentist. He also wrote textbooks. He lectured. He did research. And so he was a
renegade.
Yeah, he really was. He was always a truth seeker. And he did work on root canals that is still the kind of defines the field. But anyway, so he started wondering and heard rumors that there were native peoples around the world who had none of these problems, no health issues to speak of, no dental cavities, and perfectly straight teeth with all the room for their wisdom teeth.
Yeah.
So he figured, what, I wonder if there's something that we could learn from these people. Because at the time you had the wave of processed foods, refined vegetable oils, sugar, all that was pouring in. And he was wondering if there was a connection between that and these new health problems he was seeing in the children. So he started a plan to go to different cultural groups around the world to explore their health and see what their issues were, if they had any, and what he could learn. And for the next really 13, 15 years, he started traveling every summer when he had a break. And he and his wife would go to different parts of the world and gain the confidence of these peoples and start, looking at their health. And what he discovered was that native peoples who ate their traditional diets had totally different health trajectories than we did in America, but also compared to neighboring tribes. So these tribes would not only have no health issues to speak of, as I said, and perfectly straight teeth, but almost no cavities.
Right.
So you'd have to look in 10,000 teeth to find a single cavity in some instances.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't have Jolly Ranchers out there.
Right,
yeah.
Right. I mean, not in these tribes. They only ate their traditional diets. And when he looked at their traditional diets, they were all very much based around obviously unprocessed whole foods, and actually always based around animal products at the core.
Yeah.
And he had a vegetarian bent, so he would be very interested in finding a tribe because he thought it might be possible intellectually to eat a vegetarian diet, but he never found it.
Right.
And that was one of his biggest regrets. But when he looked at the neighboring tribes who had eaten Western foods for some time, he found that in every case, they had not only started experiencing health problems right away, the adults, but the first generation of children born to these people looked different. They had the narrowed faces, crooked teeth, overbites, underbites, not enough room for the wisdom teeth, cavities. They just weren't robust like the ancestors.
Yeah.
So in some cases, you could put the tribe would have skulls in a room on the wall, and you could see the symmetry back into time.
Interesting, yeah.
And then you start seeing the new kids coming in, and their teeth don't look anything like the ancestors, and the size of their heads, the width of their heads are different. So he was pretty shocked. And to just summarize, he warned the world back in 1942 that we couldn't continue on this track, this early, track of eating processed foods and sugar and refined vegetable oils and these things anymore. Like, we had to take this very seriously because, we were going to encounter serious problems if we went down this road. And unfortunately, he was ignored after, a few courses in Harvard anthropology classes. It was during World War II, right, that this all came out. So the world was distracted. And then after the war, the processed food revolution started, and this waves they repurposed the war, munitions factories for processed foods. And that was the end of it for a long time. So it really took a couple of nonprofits to start bringing this back in the last half of the 20th century. But it was very hard going because you basically were going against major industries that had interests in making sure people stayed addicted to processed foods.
Yeah. And stayed sick, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So now, what's the grand answer then? What does his research say? Like, besides, okay, eat whole foods and eat meat.
Yep. So basically what his research is showing is that there's a path toward physical degeneration if we continue eating processed foods. That's just like the main takeaway. Because not only do we get these foods with all this junk in it and sugar and stuff, but we're not getting the good stuff. So it's a double whammy, right? But he did find that in certain cases, these traditional cultures had a child after eating Western foods that was compromised and decided, look, we don't like where this is going. We're going to go back to our traditional diet. They would have another kid after a period of time of eating their traditional foods, and the child was once again born with the robust characteristics of the tribe. So it just because the way I would phrase it is, our blueprint is there. It's waiting to be expressed. And even if we've gone a few generations down the path towards, where we are now, where we're seeing such terrible problems in our children and fertility problems, if we return to a diet that humanity has been following for tens of thousands of years, we can, and do this for a little, a couple of years or even just a minimum of, let's say, a year, you can transform your fertility and the health of your children. And that's what our goal right now is to bring that message to the world in a way that maybe it hasn't been done before. So if parents understood that they could affect their children's intelligence, their overall health, their longevity, their fertility, and even their beauty by what they did before conception, a lot of parents would do that, because we would do anything for our children. But parents aren't generally not taught that by their pediatrician, their OBGYN, any of their health support systems. And that's not their fault because they've never been taught this.
Yeah, right. Okay, so this is a question I've always wondered. Like, right now I'm in, I would say, decent shape, right? But what if, I was married and I was hoping to conceive in the next year or so, and so I say, okay, before we start trying, I'm going to get in incredible shape. I'm going to get shredded. I'm going to eat super right. I'm going to do everything. Is that going to affect the genes I'm giving this child? Like, because right now I'm just kind of a natural ectomorph skinny dude, right? If I put on some muscle and I'm eating better, are those the new genes I'm giving the kid? Or do I just have genes that I have, regardless of my workout regime and my diet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way we look at it is more that it's on around epigenetics.
Mm-hmm.
So the expression of our genetic blueprint, and epigenetics is based on the environment that of the being we're talking about, in this case, the child. So because the epigenetic environment of the child is the parent's genes,
Mm-hmm.
which evolve in your own body, and your health and your wellness affects how healthy your genes, let's put it this way. They affect the ability for you to convey your genes in an optimal way
Mm-hmm.
to the child. So this is why the traditional cultures applied this wisdom of practicing preconception nutrition for as much as 3 years before conception.
Mm.
And I'll get to your question in just a second about what you would do. And when Price asked them, why are you doing this? They would say something like, to have healthy children, to have perfect children, or to have beautiful children.
This is what like the old tribes would say?
Yeah.
Okay.
All around the world,
Uh-huh.
from Australia to Alaska, from, Peru to Ireland and Switzerland, Swiss valleys and African tribes.
Mm-hmm.
They all said the same thing.
So they're very calculated about it.
It's one of their most sacred areas of wisdom that they derived over millennia.
Yeah.
So they figured this out.
Oh.
So given that, what we can do today is to prepare the mom and the dad
Mm-hmm.
for before conception. And that would involve things like, it would involve eating like our genes are expecting, which means nutrient-dense foods. So when I started my company in 1999, veganism, vegetarianism was the rage. Everybody was afraid of butter.
Mm-hmm.
It was a totally different world, and everyone thought,
I've never been afraid, by the way.
good, yeah. But back then it was seen as like this luxury, and don't eat too much or you're going to have heart disease, and
Mm-hmm.
that's all fortunately been eradicated for the most part. And people are no longer eating margarine, and
Mm-hmm.
which was the health food for 50 years or more. And they're so eating really traditional fats like butter and tallow and
Mm-hmm.
lard, if they're of good quality, and grass-fed and things. Pasture-raised eggs, pasture meats, good quality seafoods, organ meats, fish roe, raw milk, things like that. If you can,
Mm-hmm.
Eat the highest quality natural foods you can, minimize or eliminate seed oils and, the polyunsaturated fatty acids, minimize sugar, inflammatory foods. If you do eat grains and nuts, there's ways of preparing them so that you can maximize the nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole art and science that has been revived in the last 20 to 25 to 35 years. And, there's some resources I can recommend on that. And in this 21st century, the average mom has 300 chemicals in her breast milk. So that's pretty shocking to think
Mm-hmm.
about. The baby's first meal is like, forever chemicals and, flame retardants and things. So it's really not acceptable. So that we're in this position, and it's not the mom's fault. I want to be clear about that.
Sure.
It's not like people would willingly and knowingly do this, but because of the way our society has evolved and been so unconscious and unregulated, and the market forces are kind of creating the laws and the co-opting the regulatory agencies, as we're learning. That's just kind of where we're at. So people need to expect that we have a lot of things we need to clear out of us before we conceive. And if we do that, to answer your question, good quality exercise, stress reduction, things like that, sensible diet, focusing on nutrient-dense foods, like I just said, then we can actually, the sperm and the egg can be maximally nourished.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, if you're a builder of a house and someone, the project, funder says, the owner says, look, we've just gotten killed in the stock market. The $1 million building project, we only have, a third less, basically. You got to figure it out. So you got to go back to the plans and just figure out how to make this house with 30% less or 50% less dollars and building materials. The architect, if they wanted to continue the project, if they felt like it safely could continue, they'd probably knock out walls. They would, figure out ways of reducing the quality of the materials and to try to get the house built for less money. And unfortunately, that's what that's what happens in the fetus. If the mom and dad don't have enough nutritional richness, nature will figure out how to get that. Well, first of all, we'll figure out whether the pregnancy can continue. And one of the reasons that pregnancies fail or that infertility is rising is because there are certain laws of nature that have to be met in order for the pregnancy, first of all, to be successful, for it to continue. And then if both of those things happen, then as the mom builds the body inside her, there are certain shortcuts that happen. And one of those is the underdevelopment of the middle third of the face. So right in here, it affects the jaws, it affects the sinuses, it affects the cranium. So we're seeing an epidemic of children, and it's affected all of us as well, of having narrowed faces because the mom didn't have enough nutritional richness to build out the skull according to the blueprint. So the blueprint is there. It's just that it couldn't be expressed. And so all of us have been through that. I had dental work, orthodontistry, braces. I do have all my wisdom teeth, but probably barely. And so a lot of people had their wisdom teeth pulled. They had orthodontistry. There are some children who have to have 8 to 10 teeth pulled when they're in the childhood, once their permanent teeth come in, just to make a smile that looks something appealing, because their jaws are so narrow that they can't. There wasn't enough room for all the teeth to come in as per the blueprint.
Right.
So I know those are just some of the challenges that occur. So you can have kids that are mouth breathers because the nasal passages, the sinuses are so narrow that they can't support default nasal breathing through their whole life. There are kids who have.
And I always hear mouth breathing. What is that? What's the big deal about breathing with your mouth?
Well, it's a pretty big deal metabolically because, nitric oxide is produced in the back of the nasal passages. And when you don't breathe through your nose your whole life, or mostly, that substance doesn't get circulated through the blood vessels, which it's very much a relaxing kind of chemical that's good for dilating the blood vessels, relaxing the overall body, and various metabolic effects. So if you don't have enough, nasal breathing, it affects your metabolism and your health for your whole life. Other kids have such small mouth, negative space, the airway that's created by the teeth and the upper and lower palate, that they feel like they're choking on their tongue their whole life. There's a book called 6 Foot Tiger in a 3 Foot Cage, which discusses this a bit more. And it's very sad. A kid who feels like they're choking their whole life, because that's the punchline here, is that even though the skeletal system is compromised because of lack of nutrition, the organs underneath grow to their specified size in the blueprint. So we're not sure what all the implications of this are, because unfortunately the research hasn't been followed up on in the last half century like it should have. But there are some anecdotes that we believe suggest that it's a profound significance. When you have a skull that's smaller than the brain underneath it, it can affect the metabolism, the intelligence. It can affect the growth of the child. Theoretically, we don't know. It could affect whether they feel anxious all the time, which is the epidemic today amongst the kids. It could affect whether a kid feels normal or depressed. We don't know. After all this time, 1942 was his work. And then there was another bit of research I would love to tell you about, which came out in the 60s, that also confirmed and deepened the confirmation and the concern of our plight after Dr. Price. And, we should know the answers to these questions for sure. But basically, the other areas are the rib cage can be smaller than normal, which compresses the heart and the lungs, can lead to various conditions, we believe, potentially. Asthma and other systemic kinds of problems. The hips can be compressed in women, which can lead to difficult childbirth, which is, you expect whenever you see a Hollywood movie that when a woman gives birth, they're going to be in agony. And unfortunately, that is too often the case in our world, and that is not what our traditional ancestors experienced. They would have easy births, take a few minutes or, not long compared to our 10, 20, 30 plus hour births today in great agony.
Yeah.
And that is a direct result of the shrinking of the pelvis. So I could go on, but let's just say that unfortunately it's a problem that actually affects all of us alive today, unless you live in an uncontacted tribe in the Amazon or something.
Yeah.
We've all been affected by it. However, the good news is that we can reverse it. Okay. And that's what our call is we're looking for parents who want to pioneer this new approach, which actually is not new. It's, millennia old. And we actually have thousands of parents around the world in the last 25 years who have actually done this with tremendous results.
Okay, so I got a couple questions around genetics. So let's say I've been obese most of my life, right? And my parents are obese, and I get married, I want to have kids. If I go nuts and lose 200 pounds, like right before we conceive, again, am I giving them sort of these obese genes still? Or am I, now that I'm healthy, now that I've lost this weight, now that I'm eating better, am I giving them better genes? Or is it kind of like, maybe that's too close to conception. It's kind of like too late. You're already like, you've had these genes for so long. How does that work?
That's a really interesting question. One of the ways you might answer that is to say that I'm not a doctor or an actual scientist, but in practice. But my understanding is that the epigenetic impact of obesity, you just mentioned, like if I have parents and like it goes back and it seems to be genetic, how does that affect me and then potentially my child? Well, actually what I think probably is happening there is if a mom is obese and gives birth to a child, that child is much more likely to have problems with their weight their whole life.
Right.
And that's actually not so much genetic as much as epigenetic, so that the environment of in the womb, of the fetus in the womb and the baby in the first years of life, if it's born obese and it's got the mom's high blood sugar or, insulin resistance issues, then that is it's going to dog the child. It's going to be a problem that persists for the child's whole life. So I would be less frame it in terms of genetics as an epigenetic issue that can actually be broken. So you ask the question, if I'm really overweight or if you're overweight and you want to have a healthy child, absolutely. Getting healthy, bringing the weight, getting the metabolism balanced before your conception and birth is the best thing you could do. And you can interrupt that generational cycle, which could go back, many generations for you, but it was an epigenetic issue, probably. And that's where the science is today. Is there's some pretty good research about now what the impact of the environment for the child in the womb and in the first years of life, and how that can affect, things for the whole life, and even the children of the child. But where the research hasn't really gone yet is back before conception.
Okay.
And that's what we're intent on helping to inspire or to promote as much as possible is this, and it is starting to happen, but it's really should have been happening for the last 60, 80 years, but it's better late than never.
Right.
But I would mention that one of the reasons there is such urgency to this is the fact that the other body of research that I mentioned in passing was Dr. Pottinger, and he did cat studies in about 60 years ago in California that were pretty mind-boggling, because what he did was put multiple generations of cats through deficient diets. He did a control and looked at different cats with a normal diet, with an altered diet that's very refined, and he found that what Price was seeing with the traditional cultures, Pottinger saw with the cats. Their heads started to narrow, their teeth, their jaws, their skeletal structures, the pelvis, in just one generation.
Yeah.
But because you can run cats through multiple generations much quicker, he saw that the problems got worse with every generation. So everything I just mentioned, plus the onset of chronic diseases, degenerative diseases, antisocial behavior, infertility soared, everything that we're seeing now in our kids, he saw in these cats. You can't talk to a cat, but you can see when a cat is shrinking into a corner and scratching at everybody else, and that's not a normal cat.
That's kind of how you were when you were a vegan,
right? Yeah, after 6 years, yeah, I was not in a good place. So, but the horrible, I guess the worst part of that research for us is that Pottinger found that in the fourth generation, reproduction ceased. So, chronic diseases skyrocketing, infertility skyrocketing, antisocial behavior, mental problems, all that just going off the charts in generations one through four. But at the end of the day, the reproduction wasn't possible after the fourth generation. So what that means for us is, if you can think back in your own history, how many generations has it been since your family lived on a farm or didn't eat processed foods? For me, it was my grandfather grew up on a farm in southern Wisconsin, and had access to all the good foods, and then went to UW-Madison, and then World War II, and then my parents grew up my mom grew up born in 1944, and then grew up in the processed foods revolution. So I'm a second generation baby of this processed food revolution and deficient diets, but others are third,
right?
And we're seeing these inexplicable causes, these phenomena in our children that Kennedy is looking into, and it's long overdue. But right now, we're still just looking at what's right in front of us. And our opinion is we need to look at the bigger picture here. And the combination of Price and Pottinger's research suggests that a species only has so long to go through life in a deficient state before it becomes impossible to reproduce. So that's my hat is, we call it the Omega generation, after Kate Shanahan's Deep Nutrition was the first one to talk about that. But
basically meaning the last generation.
Final generation.
Yeah.
So are we looking into the final generation if we don't fix this? And we think so.
Interesting.
And we think that it's clearly makes sense to assume that, because if we get there, we're not going to be able to turn this around. We know we can turn it around now because of the human and animal studies show if you re-nourish the parents in time, you can turn this around. But there will come a point we can't. And we're determined not to find ourselves in that position.
Right. So what is the data on the increase of infertility over the last 20 years? Because it does seem like I'm hearing about it way more than I used to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but I know that I believe it's 1 in 6 couples have challenges or can't conceive right now, and they need help. And that's been, growing rapidly around the world. So
seems pretty high.
It is high. And to even replace our population, we need, I think, 2.1 children per family.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we're way under that. And most of the developed countries are under that at this point. So we're looking at, Japan is in an existential crisis of, they could have, I think it was like 30% of their current population in a few decades.
Mm.
I mean, it will collapse quickly when it starts. Europe is, and I may not have that exactly right, but they're in deep doo-doo, and so are a lot of countries in Europe. It's really, really, really serious. So we're committed to bringing forward the solution. We think it is the solution, is to empower parents before conception to transform themselves so they can not only get pregnant to have children, but to have the healthiest children they can.
Right. So in your opinion, like the majority of problems surrounding infertility, miscarriages, birth defects simply revolves around eating better.
That's a huge part of it. There's also the part of the conversation around toxicity. Mm-hmm. So to have 300 chemicals in the mom's blood that the baby then gets through the milk is mind-boggling. It tells you exactly where we are, that things like sleeping on a normal mattress that has flame retardants, which most of them have or have had until that's starting to change in furniture and beds now, and especially like in California, but hopefully that spreads. Most people don't smoke anymore. So why are we embedding our beds with flame retardants that you're going to breathe all night long?
Yeah.
There's brominated flours. Everything used to be made differently, and even in processed foods, like in the 1960s. And then they started changing the ingredients of that are in flours to bromines, and so that messes up our thyroid and causes huge amounts of problems. So right now, I believe only a slightly more, how would you say this? Women need to have a certain amount of vitamin D in their system in order to have a child without rickets, which means we have the problems with the bones. Mm-hmm. I think there was a study a few years ago that showed that the average number on the vitamin D scale that moms had was barely above the amount to prevent rickets. Mm. And then we had COVID where everybody stayed inside. So I can only imagine what it is now. But these are things that shouldn't be affecting the richest country in the world. Right. In 2025, we should have figured this out long ago. Right. And so we're still kind of in the nutritional dark ages, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And I think, there are clearly signs that's beginning to change, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Part of the problem for me, at least, is, most people aren't experts, right? And so they just go off of what they hear, but they hear everything. Yep. I've heard that you shouldn't eat fruit. I've heard that you should only eat meat. I've heard that the only, what's going to kill you is carbohydrates, and and all these things. And I'm just like,
it's crazy.
I'm like, well, at the end of the day, I don't have the discipline to like eat like a Navy SEAL.
Totally.
So I'm going to try to eat healthy, but mostly I'm going to just try to exercise and enjoy my life and not be like
so neurotic. No, I hear you. It's insanity out there. And I think that's one of the reasons why Dr. Price's research is so important, because he looked at traditional cultures around the world and they had different diets, but they were all similar in their nutrient profiles. And that should be a big clue to all of us, a big flashing red light that unless you eat in a way that our genes are expecting, then we're probably not giving our body what it needs to thrive. And I think that's why the pendulum has been swinging back over the last 25 years from processed foods and vegetarian and industrial soy foods and seed oils. looking at what are the foods that we really need and that help us to thrive. And so I encourage everyone to check this out, and we'll put up a short summary for people, because not everyone wants to read a 450-page book
right.
that was written in the 1940s. It's got language that's a little bit outdated in certain ways. But if people can, buy the book. But what the commonalities are, it is again around nutrient density. And that's what I had to face as a vegan was, I love the idealism is great, but ultimately plant foods are just they're not capable of giving us all kinds of nutrients. So if we put at the center of the diet, these really rich animal foods that from a pasture raised, really the highest quality you can, including things like, collagen, bone marrow, organs, things like that. If people can't get and don't have the time to eat nose to tail, which, I don't always have the chance to do that. It's now easier than it ever was to do this. So you can take, a liver supplement, like in a pill from a really good source.
Yeah.
You can take collagen, gelatin in a powder form to make smoothies and things. Raw milk. When I started my company in 99, you could get raw milk in just a couple US states. Now it's available in the vast majority.
Right.
And very, very profound therapeutic foods those are, if you can tolerate them. And a lot of times people can, if they're, of a very good quality. So your question is really well taken. Like, how do you make sense of all the dietary madness out there? And everyone has their preferred diet. And a lot of these diets are out there that they just don't have the big picture of nutrition, about how we've as a species eaten for tens of thousands of years. Yeah. Because to make a genetic change to be able to eat a new food takes 10,000 years. So that's why only some people can even handle even raw milk. Some people have never had the genetic experience for dairy products. So they're basically
I can't even handle whole milk.
Yeah. Well, and if you try like fermented raw whole milk, you may be able to. It depends on your ancestry. Yeah. But I could share a few sources and ideas with you, because I've helped a lot of people over the years with these very same questions. Yeah. And it depends on the quality, and it depends on if you prepare the foods in a way that optimizes their nutrition. Like with milk, you can even with raw milk, you can create raw kefir on the countertop. Just drop the kefir grains in, or buy a raw kefir if you live in a state like California, or know a farmer who makes the kefir. Right. You can buy it now, but those are often very digestible, just like bread. A lot of people can't handle bread, but if you eat bread that's from a good organic, source, maybe it's sprouted and fermented for 48 hours into a sourdough with a sourdough culture. Even children who become little Frankensteins when they get a piece of normal bread, and the parents would never dream of giving them gluten. I know parents who've figured this out, this sourdough, authentic sourdough. Yeah. They give their children the real deal. And even their children, who clearly could not have a placebo effect because they're 4, are fine. Right. So it has a lot to do with how you prepare these foods, including grains, beans, nuts, dairy. Yeah. And there's a whole art and science to that, as I said. Which
do you believe there's any level of effect on your nutrition based off of just a psychosomatic effect? Like, I'll give you an example. For me, I try to eat healthy, but I don't try that hard. Let's be honest. Like, I eat out a decent amount. Like I said, I just am very active, but for me, I've always just like thought, I'm healthy, and I'm not going to get sick. And I'm like incredibly healthy. I never get sick. I haven't been to the doctors in years. And part of it, I feel like, is a little bit psychosomatic. Like, I'm telling myself, no, bro, you're not going to get sick. Yeah. Like, it's not going to happen. Yeah. I'll even sometimes get what feels like the beginnings of a nasty cold. And I won't rest more. I won't drink more liquids. I'll just act like nothing's different. And I feel like it goes away in 12 to 18 hours.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's anything to that? Or do I
Absolutely.
just have a great immune system?
100%. There's a lot to that. And the studies show that things, non-physical things like, do you have a sense of meaning in your life? Do
Right.
you have a purpose?
Mhm.
Do you have friends? Do you have a good social life? Do you experience physical touch from a parent or a partner or whatever? Do you get out into nature, a fair amount? Do you have a confidence, like you said, that you're going to be healthy? All those things are incredibly profound and powerful. I would say they're probably equally, ultimately, as important to the diet, truly.
Yeah.
Or maybe probably more so, to be honest. But not when it comes to preconception nutrition. I have no evidence to suggest that you can go around these laws of nature around nutrient density and somehow get a healthy child. I mean, I've never met anybody who could do that.
Right.
It doesn't seem to although having a good relationship, in a marriage and then having a child is going to make everything better for sure.
Sure.
And knowing certain things about when you have your child, touching the child and not letting them sleep in a crib, on day one for the rest of their, their formative years. So there's lots of non-physical things that are important for children and in a relationship. But these laws of nature around nutrient density seem to be something you can't get around.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you say it's equally as important in preconception, the health of a man versus the health of a woman?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say that the woman's health is going to be absolutely pivotal, and but there's to say to a father that they could not, take care of their own nutrient situation and detoxification would be a huge mistake. It's vital. And
right, because we're the ones sending off the sperm.
Yeah.
So is it a good sperm?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for fertility, for making sure that you're conveying the best of yourself, it's absolutely vital. But I don't see how it's possible to argue that the mom's, is the environment for the child.
Yeah.
And the first, the child is going to basically pull nutrients from every part of the mom for months. It's going to go on, and then through breastfeeding. So, that is the most important. But I would hate to give people the impression that therefore the man's contribution is not critical, because it is. And if the couple really wants to have the children that enjoy the incredible benefits, things like, I won't say perfect teeth, because we're, as a species, we're several generations away from that, parents who were eating the good, high quality diets. But the way I'd frame it is, we can have children that are healthier than we are, and we can move through the generations back towards the expression of our full, perfect genetic blueprint.
Right.
But we can actually contribute with the mom and the dad, work together on this together and make these changes. The goal is to have children, whether in this generation or the next, as we rebuild our ability to have healthy children. Our children are designed to have perfect vision, for example. Traditional cultures could see stars that we can't see today without a telescope, like double stars, stars that are very, very faint or very together. And you might say, well, that's because of atmospheric pollution. Sure, it might be, but they just objectively had sharper senses, better eyes. They didn't. They never had glasses.
Yeah, they didn't even invent glasses till the 1800s, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And orthodontistry really didn't emerge until early 20th century. So people didn't have massively crooked teeth, needing to pull the wisdom teeth, for the most part, until the early 20th century. And but even when you think about smiles, we're in the Instagram era. If you think about you look at some of the pictures from Dr. Price's journeys, it's shocking. You see these native peoples with these stunning smiles, like very wide faces and beautiful string of pearls teeth. If you ever, right now, if you're listening, you could pull up a image of Serena Williams. Look at her smile. Britney Spears, like some of these Hollywood smiles that you recognize right away. There's something right about that. So our children can have that if we give them the right environment to grow into, and if nature doesn't have to take shortcuts. Our children can have immunity to dental cavities substantially, immunity to diseases. We won't probably see as many chronic or degenerative diseases in our children that we're seeing now when the parents take this approach. Can I say they won't have any? No, because I don't know. But what in the last 25 years, the parents who have done this have been amazed at how healthy these children are. And they seem to operate at a different level from kids who were raised on processed, refined foods. And another one is, every parent would want their girl to one day grow up to be fertile and to have babies easily. Who would wish 30 hours of labor, of torturous labor on their daughter? No one would do that. Well, the aperture, the size of the hips is directly related to the nutritional epigenetic environment that the daughter grows up in, starting in the womb. And that is determined by the preconception. And I'll say one more thing, that if people are thinking, well, if I get pregnant, I'll just do this approach. And you can, certainly it's going to have a good effect. But most of the time, people when the woman knows she's pregnant, it could be 6 weeks, 8 weeks or longer. The most fundamental development has already occurred in the fetus. And that's not so you've rolled the dice. You're not going to be able to turn back time and give the fetus the chance to absorb the nutrients from day one. It's just not there.
Right.
So that's just the harsh reality. We need to start before conception if we're going to give them maximal benefit. And the man and the woman really need to do this together.
Right. Okay. I like that. How much of effect on, maybe the genetics of a child, or during this preconception period, how much does it affect a child when a parent has undergone a substantial amount of trauma, emotional trauma?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. And that's why, you're bringing up some really, really good points, that as powerful as the nutritional is, it is not the only thing we should be focused on. And the statistics on trauma are pretty sobering. Like the number of people in our society who have experienced it and who carry that forward. And oftentimes it's because their parents experienced trauma. And so the cycle of trauma repeats itself. But, a lot of children experience trauma in childbirth, really difficult childbirth experiences can cause lasting trauma. So it's really important to address. And that's actually one of the things that we recommend for parents before they conceive, in an ideal world. Obviously the world's not ideal a lot, and I totally get that. But if people can do some work around emotional healing, trauma healing, before you have a child, we can not only interrupt the physical degeneration that Price talked about, but we can interrupt and transform the emotional and psychological degeneration or traumas that we often carry into our life. So another wonderful gift for the child is to give your child the ability to not replicate the patterns of our parents, and that they gave us with, often the best of intentions, but these things go down through the generations. So it's absolutely a great question, and something that is very important as well.
Yeah. Cause I've read that, if a pregnant mother has a lot of stress, it is just like essentially passed down to the child immediately.
Totally.
Like that child is born with stress, but obviously a child doesn't know what stress is, doesn't know how to deal with it,
Yeah.
and it kind of can turn into a lot of problems down the road.
I see where you're going more now. So absolutely. In fact, I think I know I saw a study some years ago where if a woman is in her, has her pregnancy near a construction site with jackhammers and heavy machinery and vibrations in the ground, it's very stressful. That can actually correlate to certain outcomes in the child that are not good. So that underscores the importance of creating a very wonderful, as the most restful, peaceful, uplifting environment for the mom during the pregnancy. Absolutely, 100%. It's and then another story. Experiences in the womb are profound. I know I just talked to a gentleman just this week who played classical music to the womb, in the womb, or the mom did. And it was for one of their children. And it was, they did some other things too, but the child was extraordinarily intelligent. And I've heard these stories before. So you can create epigenetic environments that support not just the health, but the growth, the intelligence, the emotional, sensitivity of the child. I had a friend who had a child that was a couple of years old, and somebody played a heavy metal band. I think it was Rammstein, and the child started, dancing and bobbing and weaving. I probably gave the punchline away, but when the child was in the womb, they had been at a nightclub, and the band was Rammstein, or a cover band. And the fetus started just kicking, and and they thought there was going to be like a miscarriage or something. There was like something crazy going on. So they left, and they kind of forgot about it. But a couple years into life, they played the band again, and the child went crazy, but love in a really ecstatic way. So, with the kind of foods that you give the mom, that can affect the child in terms of their palate. So the more diverse foods you can give, some spices and different things that will dramatically affect the child's interest in a variety of foods in their lives. So it's amazing how.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's funny you mentioned that. I have this couple I know. They're both musicians, and they're like in this huge Christian band, and they're always like the mother, her brothers are in the band, and they're always just playing instruments and jamming and everything, right? And I remember one day I went and hung out, and they were like jamming, and they had like a 2-year-old at the time, and they're in a basement just jamming for hours, and the 2-year-old is just like hanging out, like bobbing its head, and I'm like, most 2-year-olds are just like crying or couldn't handle this. And then like a couple of years later, I go hang out with them again. Same thing. The kid's like 4, but now the kid's like dancing. And I'm like, why does this kid have so much rhythm? Like I don't have this much rhythm,
Totally.
But the parents are so musically gifted. And I just know they were playing music the whole time she was pregnant for sure. And
absolutely.
And she'll be like singing and playing the guitar and like holding the baby, and the baby will just be chilling.
Wow.
And I'm just like, it must be. It's almost like the baby's already accustomed to a life of musicality.
100%. Yeah. It's amazing how profound the pregnancy is for the baby and how aware they are. I think it's generally accepted, and it's just a scientific fact that language development is dependent upon hearing the mom while the fetus is in the womb. So if for some reason there's no voice, the mom is unable to speak, that would be a huge challenge for the infant to learn voice, learn language, but music. So I would think that in the biohacking age, we would start to see much more focus on that, on the natal period, the pregnancy, for creating optimal environments for that. And it only goes to reason that you would try to optimize the chances for success and multidimensional development of the child by what you do, the environment you provide. But it also should underscore the importance of our society giving the mom the most opportunities to create these environments.
Yeah.
So in Europe and in some other countries, you have a very generous parental leave policy that I think we really lag behind around, and for the mom and the dad at various points. And those are critical to create the foundations for the child's well-being, but also the bonding period. If you don't have a good bonding period with the mom and the dad after the birth, it's not good, and that can last, cause massive problems for the child their whole life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So from a personal standpoint, you're married, right?
Yeah.
Do you have kids?
So my wife has a 29-year-old, and my own story is that when I was in my 30s, I had this company. And that was kind of my child, this perinatal company. And I just didn't meet
This is my child.
There you go.
Yeah.
I just didn't meet the right woman until I was basically out of the window of having children. So,
well, not you.
Not you but
physically.
But when I met Lisa, her son was already in his teens, and she, we talked about it, and I felt like, going through that again, that wonderful opportunity, it was something that I really felt when I really tuned into my own being, that this life was more about helping on a bigger level than a single family. And I love our son, and it's just been a joy to help raise him. But sometimes, I can obviously talk a lot about this stuff, and after talking with some people in the past, they asked me, how did I figure all this out? How do I know all this? And I said, well, it's because I never had kids. Because the process of having kids is so demanding and so all encompassing, and from the beginning and before the beginning, and as we were recommending, that the ability to really do the amount of research and activism and things that I've done in my life, I don't think I would have been able to do that. So.
Yeah, it enabled you to be obsessed.
Basically,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is why, we're right now. There were some periods of time where I wondered if it was even wise to have children. When you have such a thoroughly devolved kind of condition all around you, the foods are. It's difficult to get and afford very high quality foods. There's terrible things in our water, as we're all now finding out. The influences on children today are very challenging, and so I went through periods of time where I had to really ask myself, was it wise or even responsible to have children? And I feel now that we've turned a corner in our society, and now we're starting to ask the right questions. My company, we were educating people about the dangers of fluoride and industrial soy and EMFs and things back in 1999 and the early 2000s. We put out a very profound water purifying system, which is still probably one of the most powerful in the market, and a company that I sold. But those are the things that you kind of need to do if you really want to stay healthy in this world with the amount of stuff that's coming at us. Yeah. So, but now we're starting to, I think, ask the right questions and focus on putting our children first. And that's why I'm working on a book about this that will bring this to parents in a way that is, I think, more accessible than has been attempted before.
Yeah, I'm not reading a textbook from 1942.
No. And this needs to be something that it's inspiring, and you can read it in a night or two. But it's going to be, my goal is that it'll be very inspiring and very educational, and bringing it down to the essence. What do we really need to do as if we want to be parents and of really healthy children, and give them the best advantages possible? And we're also working on a movie called Inconceivable, and where we're going to bring the problems that we're facing and really kind of bring it right into a crystal clear focus around our children. Why are our children so unhealthy, and what can we do about it? And bringing in this bigger picture understanding of the multi-generational decline we've had, and how we can turn it around based on the research that I've been talking about. So, and talking to parents who've done it, because that is really critical to be inspired that parents have actually done this. And there's thousands of them who've had children who are living examples of how healthy a child can be. Our children shouldn't have to deal with, heart disease when they're 8, like is happening now, or brain tumors, or asthma, or life-threatening allergies, or all the things that our children are dealing with. We just have assumed that this is normal. Like we're so far from having healthy children as a general rule that people talk about all their children's problems as if they're normal, and it's not. And I say that with the greatest amount of love and respect for parents today and what they're going through, and also for all children. All children are special, no matter what they're actually dealing with in their health. But we can do better, and I think parents will want to do better if they understand how relatively simple it is.
So this being your life's work, it's really beautiful. Has it been challenging at times to, and maybe not so much right now, but have there been periods where it's been really hard to come to grips with the fact that you weren't able to have your own children?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a mom who would ask me a lot if I, remind me that I'm in my 30s, and it's the clock is ticking, and I know that she really wanted to have grandchildren from me, not just my wonderful sister and her amazing boys, but yeah, it has been at times, and partly it's that I love children so much. They just break my heart, how sweet they are and how amazing they are, and I love being around kids and my nephews and nieces, and so I've had to kind of satisfy myself with just the enjoyment of being watching kids grow, up from a distance, and trying to be a part of their lives as I can, but yeah, I think that the only way that I can really console myself is to know that I'm determined to make a difference and to help. And I've talked to thousands of people in my the last 25 years with my company, but also I did some private consulting with parents and moms who were having challenges conceiving. And every time I run into someone who's open and interested, I have a email I'll send, and then I'll follow up with different resources if they're interested. So it's been very gratifying to get that feedback that, I've helped people and made a difference. And so, that really makes it all worthwhile for me. But, when I look back at it, I feel like if I were to be a parent of childbearing age right now, and the situation was right, I would absolutely go for that, because I feel like the world is now, after it's been a 25-year-old kind of a dark time, in our society, and all the metrics of children have been plummeting. Like if you really pay attention to the numbers, and it's been really, really. I lie awake. That's really what I think I've been more. When I lie awake at night, it's thinking about what people are dealing with and what our children are dealing with. It really breaks my heart. And so I guess I probably came in with more of a idealistic kind of humanitarian bent, and for whatever reason, that's just what this life is about, I guess. Is trying to make a difference for more people. So
I love that perspective.
Thanks.
Okay, let me ask you this. I'm someone that very much believes in the general synchronicity of things, right? And listen, call it God, call it synchronicity, call it cosmic coincidence. I just think things are connected and things are tied together.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the connection, if any, between love and health?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it's got to be they're intimately related, right? I think there's research showing, you probably heard the story of the laboratory rabbits that were attended to by a lab technician, and they couldn't figure out why one of the control, not wasn't a control group, it was somebody, the rats given the poison, to see how long they would live, and some of the rats, or maybe
are these rats or rabbits?
Rabbits, yeah,
or rabid rats.
Some of the rabbits, I think, were cuddled and touched by the lab technicians, and that when they figured that out, they realized why they lived much longer than any of the others. And so, I think that the evidence is clear. I know it is that love is like a nutrient, and it's something that we all depend on in our lives. Yeah. And if you don't have a loving environment, it affects you profoundly for your whole life, which is again why having loving relationships is so important to have a healthy child. And it's not always, in the cards or whatever, but children absorb so much from their environment, obviously way more than just the nutrients. And it's absolutely pivotal. And it's a really good question.
Do you feel like in your own life, because it sounds like ever since your 20s, you were pretty obsessed with health and biohacking.
Yeah.
Do you feel like since you've gotten married and sort of imbued your life with a different level of love, that you've seen differences in your body and in your health?
Absolutely. Part of what I have experienced in my relationship, we've been married now, it's going to be 9 years in July, and just that ability to be accepted for who I am, and all my imperfections, and that has created the space for me to do some healing from patterns that I've had. Just like so often is the case in life, we don't often get the perfect scenario. The children come into this world in all these less than perfect scenarios, and that's life. That's the plan. And how we even met was, very synchronistic and improbable. But both of us came from relationships that we were that were not serving us and that were very dysfunctional. And so to be in a relationship where we can be able to experience deep love and acceptance has been made all the difference. Yeah. And one of the patterns that I found, maybe above all, that has been transformative was, in the environment of our loving relationship, I have been able to experience the ways that I haven't been able to love myself. And I think that's one of the most profound ways that we punish ourselves, is by feeling we're not good enough, or we don't deserve love, or the things we've done are unforgivable. We deprive ourselves of love. And so that's been something that I've been really identifying and working on in the last few years, is being in that place of unconditional acceptance of myself. Yeah. But I don't think I could have done that without having, Lisa's support and love, and creating that reflection of me as someone who's lovable. And but to love ourselves unconditionally, no matter how bad we think we are, or the stupid things we've done, is a big turning point. So, and it actually relates to this work, because there were periods of time where I feel like I may have been drawn to kind of humanitarian, service kind of level projects. And I've done a number, not just perinatal, in search of the sense of atonement, of being a good enough person, of being a person worthy of God's love, things like that. And that has really transformed in the last number of years through this work that I've been doing and the love of and my marriage, is seeing that I'm someone who is good enough, and if I never did any of this work, I would be good enough, and I could, should I see God or be in the presence of divinity, I could do so without feeling like I was unworthy, and so doing this work now in that context has been very interesting and very liberating, because I don't feel like I'm doing it at this time in my life because I need to atone. It's more because I just know that it needs to be done, and I love children, and I feel for what parents and children are going through. It must and I know many people who've, with their stories, it's heartbreaking not to be able to have children, and if you want them, and it's heartbreaking to have to, as wonderful as all kids are, and as much of a gift as all kids are, what some parents are going through with their children's health issues is almost incomprehensible. So it's really a joy to be able to bring this information forward, knowing that it's already helped so many people. I've already seen it, and I've probably seen more transformations with this material, with this approach, than 99.9% of people on the planet. I don't know many people who've seen more because of my company and the work that I've done than I mean, there are some who have. Doctors do this work, and some wonderful nonprofits are in this field, and I'm just so happy that they're there. But I am speaking about things that I know from firsthand experience, even though I don't have a biological child. So
that's cool.
It's incredible to be able to do this work.
Because I can't imagine anything worse than having a sick child. Or
exactly.
having
a child you worry about, or you're heartbroken about because the challenges that they have to overcome.
And I know some of the, I have two sisters, and one struggled a lot with getting pregnant, and eventually did IVF and got pregnant, but really challenging for years. And then another sister has had a couple miscarriages, and it's just it's one of the most harrowing things a woman can go through.
Absolutely.
And obviously for men too, but especially for women. And so to find some way to mitigate that is a beautiful endeavor.
Have you thought about it? Are you on that path in your own life about having children?
I mean, I want children. More than anything.
Cool.
I'm just I need a female involved.
Well, advertisement right now.
right. No, people are well aware. I think for myself, and I love your response was really beautiful. I think you have to find ways to elicit joy and purpose out of life, even if you don't get the things you really, really want. Right. And so, yes, I want kids more than anything. And I want marriage and love more than anything. But I've had to tell myself, this is all dependent on a few things that are fully out of my control. I'll do what I can to avail myself and to be open-hearted and to find that love. But there's a chance we can't get pregnant. There's a chance we can't have children. But then I'm going to adopt. I've decided it's that important for me, and I want that in my life. But
beautiful.
But I think you have to find ways to be at peace with your life, even if all the beautiful things you've expected don't arrive,
Yeah.
or if they leave you.
Yeah.
You know, like I think most people, if their seemingly happy marriage is disintegrated, most of them would be miserable. And a certain amount of misery is expected, but I think you have to prepare yourself to be at peace no matter what happens in your life.
It's really well said. Yeah. That's something that I've been exploring as well, just in my spiritual practice. So it's a sort of a Taoist practice of, but really being okay with, you can have intentions, but ultimately life doesn't conform to our every wish and desire, as we've been saying. So being able to be in a good, loving, grateful state for just for being alive is important. And ironically, you can draw things to yourself in that state that are profound. Once you've kind of released the attachments to specific ways that it comes to you, or specific demands that you make of life. And suddenly that's kind of what happened to me. And finding Lisa was, the universe found a way to make our relationship happen, even though we were in the same place for over 20 years. Like we could have met like many times. We were 45 miles apart in California. And as it turned out, our best friends were friends. And then we met online finally.
Oh wow. So
it was quite the universal matchmaking, but I think it just had to be the right time for us to meet. And she had to let go of her, just surrender, to God. And I did the same thing. And I met her best friend 3 months before we met online at a concert she was supposed to have been at, but didn't go at the last minute.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think the universe was like, or God was like, you know what? We're done with this circling thing.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, we're going to make it happen. So we met online and then found out we had all these commonalities and synchronicities, and our best friends were friends and everything. So it was just a lesson in surrender and humility, and just no matter what, there is a plan that's unfolding, and we just need to be patient and grateful to be alive, and the plan is unfolding. So you can trust that.
I love that. What was for you different and so special about your wife that changed everything for you?
That's a great question. I would say she has a strength and an integrity about her that is very rare in my experience. Just in my experience of the women that I had and have been in contact with, and it's been so profound. Like I've alluded to it before, the ability to accept me, even though I'm far from perfect, and affirm, and allow me, give me the space to transform, that kind of unconditional love and that integrity. So I knew when early on in our dating process, that, how it's said that there's the illusion that we have our own thoughts and our own sort of, our own worlds, I guess is the way I'd put it, is an illusion. And being with Lisa has made that clear early on, that we were going to be a transparent, loving couple that, I joked about, I've joked many times with her about, like, there's no secrets in this family. And that's a good thing, in my opinion, because, I tried to propose to her in secret, and, I arranged this elaborate thing in a house we were moving into, and I'm driving up the mountain and almost out of cell phone range. I get this call from her, and it's like, where's my the light switch? We have this clicker to turn on the lights or something. And that was the whole key of the whole thing. At the moment of truth, you press the button and all the lights come on in the deck. And, and I'm like, how is it that you happen to be home today? For one thing, it's like a weekday. I happen to have the day off or something. And how do you know that I squirreled this away in some random room?
Yeah.
And we just still laugh about it, that it's like, there's no secrets. But if you embrace that, and we can always behave like my wife is right there, and that, and honor her. And it was just it was something I was ready for. And I really needed that level of intimacy and transparency. And
well, it sounds like her love was really nurturing, and really made you feel safe,
for sure,
in a way that maybe you hadn't before.
Yeah, and she has a double master's in psychology too, and I really needed someone who could help me to address some patterns that I had in my life that I was not psychology. I was in anthropology, not psychology. So there were things that I didn't even know about myself that I think were very obvious to her, that she could, support me in dealing with, some codependent tendencies, and just being a person who has strong boundaries and who has good communication skills. I mean, these are things I did not learn in my wonderful childhood. I will say it's in northern Wisconsin on a lake in the national forest. It was an amazing way to grow up, but there's a lot of things that I, like all of us, we don't learn everything we need to know in our childhood.
They don't have therapy out there.
What's that?
So they don't have therapy out there.
No.
in the in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. But I really, so value her honesty with me, and she's modeled so many things for me, clear communication, good boundaries, transparency, and unconditional love, and just being always in integrity, and I'm not always in integrity, but being able to be and having that commitment. And that's like the bedrock of our relationship to, if I'm not in integrity, if I mess up, I apologize. That's my goal is to come back to the moment and look at myself honestly, and then, make amends and hopefully make changes. And so we have a relationship where we really are committed to that kind of transformation, and have been exploring some really powerful practices of transforming patterns, fundamental, the core things that really run us, that we know and we don't want to change, or we don't know how to change, or we don't know that they exist. And we, through the loving help of a partner, they can help mirror some of those things to us, and we can be more aware of our own stuff and move through them. So
and to do all that, you really have to jettison your ego.
Or not allow it to be in control, at least.
Sure.
So that's such a good point. You really have to make a choice between letting our ego run the show, or what's behind that. What would life be like if we didn't? Is there a deeper part of us that wants to come out, like a true self or a higher self? And I strongly believe that that's true, and that exists. And the only reason why it's not guiding us, which means the divine, has even a bigger role in our life, is because of these patterns of the consciousness and the heart that really keep us locked into these patterns that a lot of them come from our childhood. A lot of them come from the culture. Some of them potentially come from beyond this life, and we bring them in, and normally there's not really sophisticated strategies to address those, but that's another whole aspect of this perinatal that, my goal is to write another book about that when I'm further down my path on this subject. But I think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do, just to have the right nutrition and to create a good, strong physical body is just the basics.
Right.
I mean, we should
Yeah.
that should be the foundation of our
Yeah.
life. But what we're really here to do is to transform these underlying patterns that keep us locked in these ridiculous, struggles with ourself and others.
Yeah.
That, these patterns, we do them over and over and over again. And a lot of times there's not really good techniques to address those and to really transform those. So
yeah, we just need to heal ourselves across the board.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here. I mean, I feel like we come to this life to make progress in our own sort of evolution and become more able to bring higher qualities and higher service and higher love, to the world and help other people. But to do that, there's a lot of work that's required on ourselves.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I feel like the more you heal yourself, it opens you up to actually have the ability and capacity and bandwidth to help heal anyone else, right?
Absolutely.
Whether that's a partner or a child or a friend,
yeah,
or just someone you're working with, like you. Like, even for myself, some of my emotional healing, I feel like I've gone through in the last few years. I feel like it's made it 10 times easier to help other people that are in similar pain that I've been in.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I had to overcome that myself with my kind of external focus. I, for whatever reason, spent a lot of time early in life wanting to change the world around me.
Mm-hmm.
And,
you forgot that you were in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So trying to understand the causes of our society's problems and the levels going down the rabbit holes and stuff. But yes, all those things are true, but ultimately it comes down to, are we going to be effective agents of change or not? The world exists around us and there's only so much we can do to change that. But who are we, and are we bringing more love and more light and more possibilities into the world or not? And that really depends on how honest we are with ourselves and how willing we are to go at these deep patterns and these core issues that we bring, including, like you mentioned before, traumas and things that we didn't necessarily initiate. Maybe they came from our families or our, formative experiences, but they're still in our province, in our arena to transform. So we can't really escape that. But part of the problem is that our society keeps us so focused externally and so distracted, by all the opportunities for entertainment and, the millions of things we could be doing at any moment. And, nothing against all that. It's important too, to enjoy ourselves and have hobbies and passions and things. But the real one that matters and that we're going to probably remember and think about when we're leaving this world is, did we become a better person, and did we learn how to really love people and to give and care about other people, and break out of our own shell of self-obsession and self-focus.
Right.
So
yeah, that's beautiful, man. I love what you're doing, and hopefully, like we've said a few times, it's like this stuff can be really overwhelming. It's a lot of information, and you can go down various rabbit holes and fixate on different parts of this. But hopefully what people can get from this is just, maybe a spark to remind you to take care of yourself and to heal yourself. And that will enable you to heal the people around you and help the people around you.
Absolutely. And I would add that, our society keeps us focused almost on the moment, and it's very ahistorical. It doesn't think about things holistically or in a big picture sense. So that's why I think one of the reasons why we're so confused and so overwhelmed is because everybody can say anything. Anybody can say anything. Anybody can publish a book on diet or health or whatever. And there's some good ones out there for sure. But humanity has been around a long time, and we've learned a lot as a species, really. And one of the things you learn in anthropology is that our ancestors, as a general rule, were a lot healthier than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were taller, stronger, the archaeological evidence is unequivocal. They didn't have the kind of problems that we have, the various diseases and conditions and mental health disorders. All that is, 99% of that is what we've created in the last, 100 to 150 years. So when we understand that, it helps us, I think, to get a little bit more humble.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have great technologies. Yes, we have, complex societies and can do things that would amaze people from 2,000 years ago. But there's also a lot of wisdom and a lot of profound things that our ancestors have to offer. And that's why this research is so important, because I'll end with this. When you're in anthropology or archaeology, which is my field, you get a lot of theories too. A lot of people write stuff and they think and they put out books and they hypothesize about what life was like, 20,000 years ago. But the reason why Price's information and research is so important is that he actually found primitive, that's the word he used, but he didn't mean it in a derogative sense, but traditional peoples who were living the same way that people lived 20,000 years ago. They were essentially uncontacted. And when you look at people and what they actually do, that answers a lot of the questions that the academics write about and they really don't know. They're just guessing. So this research was an unbelievable thing, really, because it happened at a time when there was world travel just starting. There was photography, so he took amazing pictures of these people, these beautiful peoples, and there was enough people still intact who were traditional, like 20,000-year-old cultures, millennial-old cultures who still existed in the 20th century to actually do this research.
Right.
This research could not have happened in more than about a 20 to 40, maybe 30-year period, and somehow he got it. So I urge, and we'll put a summary in the notes here if people want to just sort of get the Cliff Notes version of it. But when you really take this, what he did in it and he helped show what we really need to be doing in order not just to have a healthy body, but to have healthy children.
Yeah.
And I urge people to do their own research always. Don't just listen to me, but allow yourself to be moved by this material and the Pottinger information, and to get involved and to, get parents who who are having problems with their fertility to this information. Support it however you can. If you're going to have kids, really embrace it, because we need a new generation of parents who are going to take up this torch and transform themselves so they can transform the next generations. Because humanity needs this right now. Yeah. And it's a really kind of a desperate situation, but we can do this, and it's going to take all of us. So.
Okay. Yeah. That's wonderful. Okay. Just to wrap it up, I like to put the heat on you and see if you have any questions for me, even though you don't even know me.
On the journey of being a better person, like what have you found that has been really helpful for you in that regard?
Yeah. I think you touched on it a little bit earlier when I was telling you, I feel like for whatever reason, I feel lucky. I feel like I just have good health. Right. Yeah. But you pointed out, you're like, well, you probably have good friendships, and you probably have purpose, and you probably have, physical touch, and you probably have relationships that are really meaningful. And yeah, to me, I've found that those things are the bedrock of my health. Yeah. And obviously you can always be better with physical fitness, and you can always be better with your diet. But I feel like having meaningful relationships in my life is really the only way I've managed to stay happy.
Right.
And to stay like content and sort of have sort of this Taoist mindset where I can be happy doing nothing. I can be happy having nothing. Yeah. Right. And obviously I aspire for more, I desire more, but yeah, I want to be, and I believe I believe that you can be deeply happy while simultaneously having deep sadness
Right.
within you.
Right.
And so I want to live a life where there's always room for joy and there's always room for love.
Absolutely.
And it's not dependent on what's happening around me.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, listen, I'm not impervious to depression and deep, deep pain, but I think it is a little bit of a choice to decide, well, I'm going to try to alchemize that pain into something beautiful and something meaningful.
Yeah.
And I think I've done that in ways with this podcast and with sharing my feelings and my vulnerability. And, yeah, you know, I think a lot of people are very think that we live in the worst times ever. Mm-hmm. I tend to believe we live in the best times ever.
Yeah.
And obviously there's some of both. You could argue both sides really well.
Sure.
But I think it's so much easier these days to connect with people, to talk about these things. Yeah. We have way more resources than we ever did. And it's so cool to hear about somebody that got married in their 40s and wasn't able to have children and talks about it so openly, especially from a male perspective. That's something that we don't have a ton of.
Yeah.
And so I think this day we live in is beautiful. You can so easily connect. Mm-hmm. And 20, 30 years ago, how would I have ever connected with you?
Yeah.
Only if we were in similar fields.
Right.
Or
in the same neighborhood or something.
Yeah. So I love the ability to be like, you know what? There's this guy that has all these deep passions and interests, and they overlap a little bit with my interests, and we can sit down and talk for 2 hours, and that's really meaningful to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible what's happening right now around the world. The unleashing of these conversations and the connections, even though our communities are kind of, in trouble a lot of times, mm-hmm. People are not doing the kinds of things, especially after COVID, that they once did to connect, and mm-hmm. We're divided politically. And a lot of people are stuck in their, we're all kind of stuck in our news feeds and all that. But I think we're at the beginning of this sort of renaissance of connections, and these podcasts are unbelievable and amazing how they proliferate. I'm amazed that people have so much appetite for these things and time to spend. It's amazing and fantastic to witness people's thirst for community and connection. So I appreciate you doing this. You're already at what? You just said 134?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it's been over a year and a half or 2
years?
We've
I started the podcast about 5 years ago.
Okay.
But I wasn't, like I said, I was just doing it in my basement, kind of ad hoc, and I wasn't as consistent for the first few years. Sure. And it's when you first start and it's not the highest of quality, it's hard to get guests, mm-hmm. and it's hard to get guests week after week after week. And so it took a while to get to where we're at now.
Sure.
But
yeah. Well, good for you for keeping at it and keeping these conversations moving forward and engaging. So
thanks, man.
Do a great job.
Thanks. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll put all, the links and things you want to share in the show notes so people can do some deep dives if they want.
That sounds great.
Okay. Appreciate it, man.